Hi, I'm Dr. Cooley, and we're going to talk about the next part of our Fundamentals to Health series, and that's establishing or living what I call the aerobic lifestyle. So there was a previous video that we talked about diet and nutrition, and there's another video where we're going to focus on movement and moving throughout the day, and those are extremely important. And this next one we're really going to focus on, it's a term that I kind of stole from Dr. Stephen Gangemi and Dr. Phil Maffetone, if anyone's familiar with those guys, but it's living this aerobic lifestyle, which really comes down to lowering all the stress in your life as much as possible. And there's four big things we're really going to be focusing on when it comes to this aerobic lifestyle. The first thing is blood sugar stability. Then we're going to talk about developing this aerobic metabolism, or this like aerobic endurance for exercise. But even more importantly than just exercise is actually this aerobic metabolism for life. Third thing we're going to talk about is just basic stress management techniques you can utilize. And the fourth thing is going to be sleep habits. So when it comes to blood sugar stability, this is such an overlooked aspect of health, even though most people should realize that their blood sugar is out of control. The amount of people that have diabetes is an astronomical number. It's only going to keep growing. But a lot of people don't really realize that they've already, long before they became diabetic, they already had these incredible blood sugar swings and never really realized it. Or they realized it and never really knew what to do about it. But if your blood sugar is unstable, a couple of the big things that can happen from that are your brain is not going to perform the way that it wants. So any type of brain condition, whether it's just everyday brain fog or have a hard time remembering people or remembering names or remembering facts, or things as severe as Alzheimer's, Parkinson's, dementia, a lot of those things are actually a result of poor blood sugar stability. The other thing is when it comes to hormone issues, and there's a ton of people with hormone issues, whether it's thyroid dysfunction or whether or not like a female has imbalances in their cycles are all over the place, or a guy that can start to develop more like female characteristics. These are all like signs of hormone imbalance. But in order to correct any hormone imbalance, you have to get your blood sugar stabilized first. Otherwise, there's nothing you can do. I mean, if you had a thyroid issue and you took a thyroid medication, but you never took the steps to really stabilize that blood sugar, you're never going to feel as good as you could. And then the other biggest thing, probably from a just general symptomatology, is if you don't have your blood sugar stabilized, you're always going to be tired. Not always going to be tired. You'll have bouts of energy, but you're also going to have these bouts of crashes. And the biggest thing for getting your blood sugar stabilized, it all starts with diet. In order to stabilize your blood sugar through diet, in general, it's going to mean a pretty big reduction in carbohydrate intake. You want to avoid meals that are based solely on carbohydrates. And these are going to be, if I'm having just pasta for dinner, these are things that are really going to affect my blood sugar. If I'm having just a piece of pizza for dinner, those are really going to affect my blood sugar. But also on top of that is like if you have for breakfast, if all you had was a bagel, or if all you had was a waffle or a pancake or even cereal, because a lot of times if people are eating cereal, they're going to eat it with this low-fat milk and all these things. There's no other like real fat sources or protein sources in these meals, so people are just getting this real large influx of carbohydrates into their system. So one way to combat the carbohydrate intake is to try to include fat and protein at every meal. If you're having cereal, you want to have that cereal with whole milk, because this way you're going to have more fat, and it's going to lower this blood sugar spike that can occur from having just cereal. If you're going to have, I wouldn't recommend in general just having a bagel for breakfast. I'd want you to have some more better source of protein and fat in there. But if you're going to have something that was more carbohydrate based, make sure you throw on like some butter or some sort of fat or oil with it, some sort of a good fat or oil with it, to make sure that you're not going to have as much of a blood sugar spike. Another big thing that can throw our blood sugar off is if we're constantly throwing down caffeine. So not that 1 cup of coffee is the enemy, but if we start having more than 1 cup of coffee a day, that can kind of wreak havoc on some of your hormones and create some imbalances in your blood sugar. But yeah, definitely start including fat at every meal. Another big thing would be, if a lot of people like yogurt, especially in New York, it's a big thing up here. But if you go to the grocery store, everybody's buying no fat or low fat yogurt. It's actually hard to find full fat yogurt, but that's actually what I recommend to patients. It does taste a lot better actually too, and you're not going to have as much sugar in that food. And when it comes to like lunch, if you had like a salad for lunch, don't be shy with putting the salad dressing on there, but just make sure that it's a salad dressing that's based on a good quality fat like olive oil. And when it comes to dinner, if you're gonna have some vegetables, don't be scared to throw that grass-fed butter on there and really load it up. And just try to get some protein in every meal too. So the big reason why we want to avoid these meals that are based solely on carbohydrates is this balance between insulin and cortisol. So when we eat a meal that has a lot of carbohydrates in it, we're going to get this spike in blood sugar, and now our body is going to respond to that by raising our insulin levels. And when we want to raise these insulin levels because we need to get this blood sugar out of our blood and into our tissues. You can think of insulin it's a storage chemical, all right? So the other thing is, when my insulin levels are high, I'm going to be constantly storing things, but not necessarily burning things. There's another reason why, there's a lot of reasons why people may get tired after they eat, but a big reason is when these insulin levels go up, that's actually going to cause you to be fatigued. But so now I have this high blood sugar and I have this insulin spike, and now as a result of that high insulin, now the blood sugar has actually come down, and a lot of times it will come down more than what it should, okay? And when this happens, now we have this low blood sugar situation. It's actually going to call on our body to start releasing cortisol to bring the blood sugar back up. And it's not like this happens overnight, okay? But if you were to look at somebody in their whole lifetime, like how much carbohydrates they eat and how many times they had this high insulin caused by this, and then this rebound of this cortisol release to try to bring everything back in balance, and all this is getting caused because people are eating too many carbohydrates. Over time, that just starts to wreak havoc on your system. You start to have, from excess cortisol, you start to have abdominal fat. From excess insulin, you may get inflammation. You may get other issues with other hormones like estrogen or progesterone. But the carbohydrate intake, it's not the enemy, but for most people, they do need to get that carbohydrate intake way down. And for someone that has had a history of long-term difficulty losing weight or long-term hormone issues, I recommend this thing called the 2-week test, which is actually a very strict carbohydrate restriction for 2 weeks. So the only carbohydrates you'll be eating would be in the form of vegetables, which isn't a ton of calories. But this is the other thing, like if you can get through that, say you need to get through that 2-week test and you want to start eating carbohydrates again, that's fine. But this is actually a cool thing. Like if you eat a piece of bread just on its own, that's going to cause a greater spike in your blood sugar than if you had a piece of bread with just some butter on it. As soon as you throw some fat or protein on that carbohydrate, the effect that has on your blood sugar actually gets lessened immediately. Other hidden causes of blood sugar instability can be artificial sweeteners, or even not necessarily artificial sweeteners, but low-calorie sweeteners like stevia. But you definitely want to avoid things like aspartame or Splenda, things like that. No one should ever consume that stuff. But something a lot of people that are trying to lose weight are gonna consume something like stevia, but they don't really realize that it's actually still gonna have this negative impact on their hormone system that just eating regular sugar would have. And the main reason is you're basically when you consume something that's really sweet, you're telling you have that in your mouth. You're actually telling your brain, like, all right, there's some sweet stuff coming in. My brain already starts working to try to prepare myself for this increase in blood sugar. But if you eat these low-calorie sweeteners, there's actually never any calories coming in, so you're getting this higher insulin level without any sugar to go along with it. So sometimes eating things like that can actually cause a reactive low blood sugar state even quicker than eating just regular sugar. Another big thing that I try to get people away from is chewing gum. It's a similar type of mechanism where you're constantly chewing this sweet food. You're constantly telling your brain that there's sugar coming to the system, but it never really comes, and that can put you down that same path towards having these difficult insulin levels that are hard to control. When it comes to dieting, and it's not that necessarily everyone needs to do this drastic, extremely low carbohydrate diet, but in order to really lose weight, it comes down to more than just calorie restriction, okay? What you really need to do is shift a person from not being a sugar burner, but to being a fat burner. The reason why people have so much stored fat on their body is because they can't actually tap into those fat stores in order to use that for energy. They're constantly utilizing sugar in their body for energy, and as a result, they're always hungry, or they're never able to utilize these other stored sources of energy, and they have to eat all the time, or they're constantly craving carbohydrates because that's all their body knows how to run on. So when it comes to dieting, the biggest thing is really trying to do what you can do to focus, to shift your metabolism towards more of a fat burning metabolism. And the biggest thing you can do for that is get those insulin levels down. And to get those insulin levels down, most of the time you have to get that carbohydrate intake down. Another big thing people might not realize is, all right, if I want to lose weight, I'll probably just cut out all carbohydrates and I'll cut out all fat and I'll eat just protein. The problem with that is that can still have a negative impact on those insulin levels. So things to start doing right away: get that carbohydrate intake down, get that fat intake up, and make sure that your insulin and cortisol levels are not going all over the place, which can be a difficult thing to do on your own. But another key thing too when you're dieting is to not be hungry. If you're constantly hungry while you're dieting, that diet is eventually going to fail. And in order to not be hungry all the time dieting, you need to become a better fat burner. We just talked about how carbohydrates and diet will affect our ability to burn fat, but another big thing that's going to affect our ability to burn fat is how we exercise. So you could be having the most perfect diet in the world. You're living this lifestyle where you actually don't have a lot of stressors in your life, but you could be a poor fat burner because you're constantly killing yourself when you go and work out. And this is a concept that's really been brought to the forefront by Dr. Phil Maffetone, and it's developing this aerobic metabolism. And the best way to do that is to train aerobically. All right, so how do you train aerobically? So what you need to do is establish what is your aerobic heart rate. And what I mean by that is, what is the maximum heart rate that your body can be functioning at before your body starts to shift into an anaerobic metabolism, or a sugar burning metabolism. And so some people might go, they visit with a trainer, and they've heard of this formula. The most I should work out would be, or the highest my heart rate should get on a workout should be 220 minus my age. And that's really not a good number to use, because if you just use that as your number, take me for example, I could be working out at well into the 180s, where really for me to train aerobically, purely aerobic, and become as aerobically efficient as possible, I really don't want to go over 145 beats per minute when I train. So we utilize this formula developed by Dr. Maffetone called the 180 formula. And you start with 180, you subtract your age, and you may subtract 5 or 10 points depending on other factors of health, and we'll leave a link to that at the bottom of this webinar. But that's how you calculate your maximum aerobic heart rate. Now once you have that number, And now you're going to pick an aerobic activity to go exercise with, whether it's jogging, riding a bike, or even just walking might be enough to get your heart rate up to that zone. So you start off and say you're going to go for a jog. You want to take a good 10 to 15 minutes to try to bring that heart rate up to your maximum aerobic heart rate. So for me, if I'm going out for a run, it's going to take me 10 or 15 minutes to get up to that 145 number. And for someone that's just starting off, they might just want to bring their heart rate up to that number and then start to bring it back down. For me, I've been running for a little while, so if I bring my heart rate up to that number, I want to maintain it at that number maybe for 30 minutes or however long I want my workout to be that day. And then I want to start bringing that heart rate back down. So that whole time that I'm in this aerobic zone, I should be able to maintain my fat burning. Like a good way to know if you've done a good aerobic workout is you finish that workout and you actually feel refreshed and not gassed. All right? You feel like you can just go out and do that same thing right again. And the other thing is, it's not to say that anaerobic activities, these high intensity exercises, are not they actually are not a bad thing to do, except for you want to be able to do that once you've started to establish some form of an aerobic base. All right, so for most people, because our lives are so stressful and our diets are filled with sugar and carbohydrates and we're not really good fat burners, for the most part, people need to just start developing this aerobic base before they go and sign up to the gym and just start doing all these high intensity workouts. Those high intensity workouts might work for a month, maybe 6 weeks, but eventually your body will start to break down and you won't be able to stay with it in the long term. And that brings us to the next point when it comes to developing the aerobic system. That's being able to just train consistently. A lot of people, they start off working out, they work out so hard for like 2 weeks and then they're done. They're wiped out. You need to like just build up this system slowly and just continuously work at it. You don't have to necessarily do it every day depending on your time constraints, but you need to try to develop some form of consistency. We're getting out there 4 times a week or getting that heart rate into that aerobic zone like 4 times a week. And when it comes to training, you just need to make that ingrained in your just regular daily routine. Like it's just as much as brushing your teeth or eating dinner. You just need to figure out a way to prioritize that and make it part of your life. So the next thing we're going to talk about is just general stress management. So if you can stabilize your blood sugar and you can develop this aerobic base, your body's ability to handle stress is going to be greatly improved, okay? But sometimes if the other stresses in your life, like your job is really intense, or your relationships at home are not very relaxing, or you like to stay up really late all the time, and you're just not really trying to commit yourself to getting as much sleep as you should. All those things can cause you to not live this aerobic lifestyle, okay? So you could eat really well, develop that aerobic base, but if all those other factors are too much, you're still not going to be living an aerobic lifestyle. You're still going to be producing all these cortisol levels in your body, and you're not really going to have the tools so that your body can heal and control inflammation and control disease, okay? So the difficult thing about that is if your work stress is really intense, there's not much you can do about it, but you can control what you can control. So if my work stress is really intense, I'm gonna be extra careful when it comes to my diet. I'm gonna make sure my diet is really locked in. I'm gonna make sure that I'm really not doing any anaerobic type exercises until my work calms down, and now I can start increasing that intensity of my exercises. Or maybe I don't have to be so careful with what I eat. But you just have to take all aspects of life into consideration and keep that in mind when you're choosing what you're eating and when you're choosing your workout plan. And the last thing we're just going to talk about are just general sleep habits. Now, a lot of people that are sugar burners and a lot of people that live this high stress lifestyle, they don't sleep very well to begin with. So in order to sleep better, the first 2 things you have to do are really stabilize that blood sugar and try to develop that aerobic base. But on top of that, just simple things that people need to do to sleep better are make sure the room is completely dark, no lights in the room. You want to get rid of all electronics. You don't want any distractions. Like unless you want to try to get that phone out of your room. You want to not really watch TV right before you go to bed. Or if you do watch, some people watch TV, it does actually calm them down. But if you're watching TV, make sure you're not watching something that's like a really intense show that's actually gonna like wake you up and stimulate your adrenals right before you're trying to get to bed. You don't want to eat sugar too close to falling asleep because that's gonna set you up for a possible blood sugar crash throughout the night, which is a big stressor to the body, which is a big reason why people wake up at night. And those are probably the biggest things I would do for just get that sleep under control, other than making a commitment to trying to go to bed at a regular time every night too. So in summary, when it comes to living this aerobic lifestyle, which is actually really just living a pretty much a stress-free lifestyle, you got to get that blood sugar stabilized. You got to develop that aerobic system. You got to try to recognize that your life may be very stressful and try to control what you can control when it comes to that. And then the last thing is just develop good sleep habits. If you can do all those things, you're going to notice that so many things get better. Like you're not tired all the time. Or you're not dealing with all these aches and pains all the time. And you're just going to be living this healthier lifestyle. If you have any questions, feel free to contact me at the office, and I can talk to you about that in more detail. Thanks.